TitleMatchNetwork.com.
Who gave you the name Mean Gene?
Jesse Ventura.
Okay, that was my next question. Some of your early memories of working with Jesse the Body Ventura in AWA.
Let me, as long as we're on the subject of the moniker Mean Gene, I was never in love with it, but I guess it served me well through the years. We've got a few burger and pizza joints up with the Mean Gene's name on it. Jesse Ventura was this flamboyant guy with the boas and the tie-dyes and everything else who would come on. And our regular show, which we would do wraparounds on. The wrestling was one thing and separate, and then we do the wraparounds. Jesse would come on out, and he always was a name dropper. Jesse, where have you been this week? Well, I've been with Mick Jagger and the Rolling Stones, and Keith Richards and myself. We're like this. God, that's impressive, Jesse. Who else? Bruce Springsteen. God, does he love me? Wants me to be his personal bodyguard. So the one time he came in and said, Mean Gene, or no, he didn't say Mean Gene. He said, Gene Okerlund, do you know who I was partying with this last weekend? I said, Jesse, I wouldn't have a clue. He said, Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers.
Right.
I said, you're kidding me, Tom Petty? Wow. He says, you know who Tom Petty is? And I says, well, of course I do, Jesse. He's a famous race car driver. And with that, that's where Jesse came up. That was Mean Gene, and the name kind of stuck after that.
Did you ever think that Jesse would go on later in life to become a mayor and all that stuff? Governor, I'm sorry.
A mayor also.
Right.
Yeah, both the mayor and a governor. The one thing that I guess I realized at this juncture in my life, you never say never. A lot of people thought Jesse Ventura was a kook. He was a bona fide, free spirit. In his book, Don't Have Time to Bleed, or whatever the name it was,
right.
Too much information there. He talked about the Mustang Ranch and about smoking a joint or two through the years. Maybe that was too much information, but you know what? In Jesse, at least, you knew what you got because he didn't hold anything back. He didn't try to kayfabe anybody.
Right.
He told it the way he saw it. And a very opinionated man, no question about it.
How real back then was the rivalry between Hulk Hogan and Jesse Ventura?
Well, there was a rivalry, still is today. Jesse was Jesse, and to tell you the truth, I think he might have done a little bit of a knockoff on superstar Billy Graham, which they also accused Hogan of doing, with this. But there was a rivalry there. Jesse was on top when Hogan came into the territory in the AWA, and all of a sudden, Hogan became the big deal. Jesse and Adrian bailed. They went to New York, and they didn't see each other until Hogan arrived on the scene here in late '83, and of course, the big January in '84, where he became the WWF World Heavyweight Champion. Jesse did not like that. So that was my spot.
Right. I guess, were you surprised when you saw more and more of your old AWA peers coming over?
No, not at all. I knew they had great talent back there. The guys were trained well. They were, at least in the ring, disciplined. Some of the organizations weren't run by wrestling people, quite candidly, and things got a little out of control. People would get hurt. Our business is not to hurt our talent, not to hurt each other, protect them, because we're all in for a good time, have fun, make money.
Right.
I was kind of a semi-wrestling fan. It came on late nights on Saturday night, and I'd catch Verne Gagne and company back in the mid to late 50s. And then I kind of followed it when I went on to college. Matter of fact, I went to school with a guy by the name of Jimmy Raschke,
right,
at Nebraska. No, just kidding. But no, Baron von Raschke was down at the University of Nebraska, and I was there. So, yeah, I kind of followed it, but not like today's, hardcore fans.
Right.
Not meaning hardcore, but dedicated fans.
Right. What did you major?
I have a significant background in broadcasting. All of it up until the point I started doing wrestling was in radio. And I worked for some fairly big stations. I worked part-time when I was going to school in Lincoln, Nebraska. I went then when I got out of school to Omaha, which was a biggie.
Right.
Warren Buffett's from there, so what the hell?
Huh.
But I worked at KOIL in Omaha for a couple of years. Then I subsequently went to Minneapolis and got into radio in a couple of stations there, where I was actually a program director, and a pure program director, one that wouldn't have to be on the air. That lasted about 1 week. So I had about 9 years of on-air experience in radio.
So how did you make it over into the wrestling world? How did that come about?
That's a kooky story, maybe kinky too. But I'm just trying to think here. I happen to be a salesman at a television station in the Twin Cities, and the AWA was based in the Twin Cities. They did a live show every Saturday night, and there was a gentleman by the name of Marty O'Neill, the Irishman from St. Paul, who was the longtime voice of the AWA. He had a sports play-by-play background and was kind of a legitimate guy. Smoked cigars, cocktails, golf, much of the same things that I do. So I was asked to pop in and host this show because he was ill and would be unable to make it. I did it reluctantly, actually greed reared its ugly head, and I got a couple of bucks under the table from Gagne. And I said, sure, I'd be more than happy to do it. I didn't know jack about wrestling when it comes to the holds and the moves and things like that. He said, just sit down and call what you see. And I think that probably as a non-broadcaster, which Verne Gagne is and was, I think was probably the best advice that I have ever gotten. Today, the play-by-play guys, you sit down and listen to a match, and they're plugging this, they're plugging how these two became an item, and don't miss SummerSlam, and don't miss the Great American Bash, and next Friday on SmackDown, you'll see so much cross-promotion there. Those are back in the old days. You know what you did? You called the match, and that was it.
Right. What was the hardest thing to grasp about announcing the shows for you early on?
Well, I guess the hardest thing for me to really, I don't know, I'm thinking of a word here, but to really be able to, in the play-by-play, understand where the guys are going with a match, where they're telling stories, which they did back in those days. You'd tell stories kind of like in a caricature or an animation. And sometimes you'd get, as Mr. Fuji would say, cross-doubled. The guys would have gimmick or false finishes. And I had a tendency as an announcer in doing play-by-play, I guess, to anticipate. Wrong thing to do. You need to just call it as you see it. And I think that was an obstacle that took me maybe a year or two to get over.
Right.
And once I got that straight in my head, all was well.
Did anyone ever give you bullets on bullet points? And if so, who?
Did anybody
Ever give you like pointers as far as like announcing, or did you?
You know what? They did. And of course, I became a student of the game, learning, some of the holds and moves. Tell you the truth, I made up a lot of them as we went along. I mean, what's a Beal throw, right? Named after the late, great Benny Beal. Verne Gagne says, who the hell is Benny Beal? It's a hip toss takedown. That's it.
Right.
No Beal throw.
Who did you work closest with early on in AWA? Who did you work with close?
Well, I was kind of a one-man show there. We did have a couple of play-by-play guys that weaved in and out. But I'd have to say that probably I worked with Verne closest, because I was relegated to doing my job probably 1.5 days a week. I was definitely a part-time guy. And I guess in his own way, he would smart me up on the television matches. And also we did a lot of recording with 1 or 2 camera shoots at various arenas. We had to go to Canada for Canadian content. So that was very, very important to the company.
TitleMatchNetwork.com